Very much welcome to the Swedish House of Finance at the Stockholm School of Economics. It's my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Professor Annamaria Lusardi from George Washington School of Business, and where she's the founder and the academic director of its Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center. I would like to welcome Annamaria on the stage and continue and do the presentation. So please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's really so great to be here today. I am delighted to get this prize. I was extremely happy to come and get it, and I had a wonderful meeting already today. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to put together actually a lot of the project that we have done on this topic, because the topic of long-term financial security is actually a really big topic and is hard to address in just one paper. And also I would love to tell you about also this collaboration we have had with the Swedish researcher as well. Again, you know, today at lunch, I just realized that you also have important institutions in Sweden that actually think about financial security and in the long term for the individual. So I spoke with the regulation authority and also the business community and even the CEO of Skandia, and it's really amazing to see the type of work that Sweden has been doing in this topic. I would like to start to tell you why I'm so focused on financial literacy in particular, and why financial literacy is so important for financial security. The first thing that comes to mind, of course, is the pension system, which is changing everywhere, and certainly in Sweden, certainly in Italy, and certainly in the United States, some of the countries where I've done a lot of the work. But that's not just the pension system. There are important changes in the labor market, including the fact that young people change job very often, that skills and the divergence of wages are very important. And so, you know, even education becomes a financial investment and an important investment. And certainly changes in financial market, where we see a lot more complex financial instrument, and not just on the asset side, but what has happened is we have seen a great increase and opening of opportunities for borrowing. So contrary, for example, to the past, almost everybody now has greater access to borrowing. The reason why I am always putting this slide, I presented this slide this morning, and so people feel like I only have the one topic to say, but in fact, this is to me a very, very important topic, which is that if you look at the changes that are happening today, they are not just in one sector. They are not just in the pension system. They are very economy-wide changes. And these changes, in my view, are not driven just by political decision, but they are driven by important forces like increasing longevity, increasing the globalization of the markets. So these are changes that are happening for the future, and that's why I've put in there a picture probably for the people for which this is more important, which is millennial. The other reason why this picture is there is that now some of my slides are done by my team, and these are all composed of millennials. So millennials to me are very, very important people. I actually interact with them every day, and I find them very difficult. But they are also our future. And you know, a lot of the financial literacy has come to play a lot of after financial crisis. So I think financial literacy is often associated with the word financial crisis, or policy have been put in place because of financial crisis. But I actually think that financial literacy and financial education policy are a response to a world which is changing. And that's what this first slide is telling us, which is we are going to witness a lot of changes. These changes are already happening very rapidly, and we need to change with them. And so, you know, the world is changing so fast, and the first question I would like to ask, or we have asked in our research, is how well equipped are people to this kind of changing economy, and how are they able to make decisions about the future? Does financial literacy matter? And I'm going to look at the specific things about the future, which is retirement planning. So even to look at that retirement planning actually was hard enough, but we were able to do so, and we were able to do so across countries. So that's why I'm focusing a little bit on the retirement planning. And then I'm also going to say, given those changes, what can we do to improve financial literacy and retirement planning and financial decisions for the future? So that's why I'm going to combine some of our research. First, the research that establishes, in a sense, how much people are prepared. I'm going to show, and I think that's an important question, but does financial literacy matter? And if it matters, what can we do to improve financial literacy? And this is really the work that we have done since the foundation of this new center at George Washington University. So let me start with the first question, and I want to almost take you back with me almost 10 years when we had to first, and this actually happened, and we had this opportunity to design actually a small module for a special data set in the US, which is called the Health and Retirement Study. The reason why I'm telling you so is when we ask these questions, or when we try to measure financial literacy, there was very little that existed, and certainly there weren't a survey, national survey, where we could look at how much people knew. Surveys, but the problem is, what do you ask to measure financial literacy? Do you ask the Black-Scholes, whether people know the Black-Scholes formula so they can buy convertible bonds, or they know the price, or what do you ask? So our, we went back to the theory and thought, what are, in a sense, the basic topic or questions that are really important for people to make financial decision about their future? So we look back at a simple theory of saving and investing, and from there we derive, in a sense, the fundamental concept, in a sense, that people need to know. And because we only had 3 questions, so actually they gave us this module, but then they said only 3 questions. So we had to choose the most important one, and we chose interest compounding, inflation, and risk diversification. In a sense, what we thought was an initial constraint, it actually turned out to be a great opportunity. I'm going to come back to this in a moment. But what I think is important here, and by the way, the CEO of Scandia asked me this question today, so I hope I passed that test. When he asked, what is this financial literacy? How would you measure it? And so we actually thought a long time about, what are these really fundamental concepts. And, these concepts, by the way, are truly fundamental, and they are not specific to a country. So you could ask them, in a sense, in every context, because the interest compounding applies everywhere. It's not a US-specific concept or an Italian concept. Inflationary diversifications as well are, in a sense, law by math and statistics. And the other, in a sense, more important questions is that, a lot of this financial literacy has to do about decision about the future. And that's why, in a sense, this time dimension, the interest compounding, the inflation, and the risk diversifications are so important. As I mentioned to you, these were, for us, great constraints. We could only measure financial literacy with 3 questions, and so we complain a lot about that, and we try to really improve the space we had, and we were told no. And we actually are very happy that only 3 questions were possible, probably because there were only 3, now we were able to add this question in a lot of other surveys, because actually there was space often for 3 questions. And by the way, we were also helped at the fact that, in a sense, these theories and this application apply everywhere, so they are not, for example, specific to the US. I'm going to actually show you the wording of the question and what we use. These were really the questions that were designed just for a special module. And as you can see, we really look at the ABC, in a sense, of personal finance. Right, so we have looked at incredibly simple questions. You know, the first question is mostly about capacity to do a 2% calculation in the context of interest rate. The second question is a very simple questions about inflation and comparing inflation with the interest rate. The third question is quite complex in a sense, or more complex than the first two on purpose. And it also tries to differentiate among level of financial knowledge, and I'm going to read them very quickly to you, because what we are trying to do here, first of all, is a joint test of knowledge and also knowledge of the finance language. You know, we have kept it, in a sense, as simple as possible, but we have also kept it in the language in which, you know, an economic newspaper would write, and in the kind of the finance world. You know, so the first question is whether people, if they had the $100 in a saving account and the interest rate is 2% per year, do they know that after 5 years they get more than 1 or 2? That's not super complex, right? You know, the second question is about the interest rate on a saving account and the inflation. The last question, you know, is also made complex by the fact that we wanted to really focus on a single stock, and to make it even stronger, we said the company stock. We asked this question in 2004 first, so we had all in mind Enron and all the experience of Enron. But remember, these are a joint test of knowledge of finance and the knowledge of the finance concept. So I'm very happy to tell you that after our experience in the US, we have worked with more than 14 countries, including Sweden. I'm very happy that Johan Almerberg is here, because I remember also receiving his email many, many years ago asking me whether he could, you know, whether he had asked the same questions and whether we could have an exchange of comments about his project and his paper. And we invited him to come to our first meeting, which was a meeting of all these papers presented. So we actually have worked with all of these countries, and we had a joint project, and we invited all of those researchers. And the first meeting was actually held in the Amalfi Coast. So we didn't choose the place on purpose. It was just that there was a conference of mathematical economics. And I don't know whether Join participated to the project because it was an interesting project, or because it was the Amalfi Coast. But since then, we have actually kept the collaboration, so it worked well. You know, more recently, we have worked with Finland to add these questions, and these 3 questions are now in the US survey, Consumer Finances, the very last survey. They are also present in several Latin American countries and also in several countries in Eastern Europe. I want to go through some of the findings that we have, but also to tell you that we have been able to, for example, publish all of these papers in special issues, and to compare all of these results, in a sense, in a very consistent way across countries. In the US, I actually have worked a lot with the regulatory authority, and after these questions were added in 2004, in a special module, we were able, starting in 2009, to add this question in a national survey with actually a lot of respondents. This was done by the regulatory authority, and we have by then done 3 waves of the data. The reason why you have the same picture with the same person who doesn't age is because this is not a panel data set, it's a cross-sectional data set. So we ask the same questions you know, across, in a sense, different period of time, but we are not able to follow the same person over time. But now we have also information about financial literacy in 2015. So let me show you a few features of this data, just to tell you about this project, which we call financial literacy around the world, or FLAT world for the initials. The interesting things about when you look at the US, which is the country with the most advanced financial market, only 65% of people can do this 2% calculation, while a good 1 in 5 get this calculation wrong. For the second question about inflation, 64% get this question right, and again, 1 in 5 got the question wrong. The questions which certainly created much more difficulty is the question about risk diversification, where we got a good 1/3 of the population. So here, like, we shift the way in which the question are answered, where now 1/3 say, I do not know. And this is one way, one methodology we have chosen to actually ask these questions. So we don't ask people to do a calculation in their head, but there are a possibility to choose the answer, but you also are not forced to choose. You can say, I do not know, or you can refuse to answer. The refuse to answer are not the issue, but the do not know are actually very, very informative. If you look at the proportion of people who answer all of these 3 questions correct, 30% are able to answer this question correct. So in the US, where you probably are asked many decisions, where young people, those millennials we showed earlier, have to make a lot of decisions. In fact, 30% of the population only can answer these 3 questions. Let me turn to Sweden right away. And here you see already a big difference, which is that in Sweden, many people, 35% only answer this, but it's not a 2% calculation. I'll show you this just to tell you that, here something is going on. I'll show you in a moment. Similar questions about the inflation. For the risk diversification, we see also a substantial proportion of do not know, but perhaps a little less than in other countries. Now, what's happening here is the question is asked differently. In Sweden, you actually have to do the calculation yourself. Okay, it's actually a true interest compounding calculation. Only 35% get it. When we ask a similar question in the US, we get very similar finding. That if you really ask an interest compounding question, more or less 30% of the population know about this interest compounding calculation. I want to tell you about Germany, because again, what we see here is what we have seen in many other countries. The interest rate, they get it, but the inflation potentially higher. But yet again, when you talk about risk diversification, you get this 1/3 of do not know. And let me turn to Japan. Remember, Japan had experienced more than inflation, had experienced deflation, and is reflected here in the data. This is actually one of the countries where even the inflation questions is answered with a high proportion of do not know answer. And again, the risk diversification is what people know the least. So the reason why it's so important to do an international comparison is exactly that what we have discovered, that the world is flat indeed, meaning that even across country, we have a lot of similar behavior. The similarities, even when you look at very basic concept, a large part of the population doesn't know all of the concept, that the risk is really the topic that people know the least. If we look, by the way, at subgroups, the people who know the least are very, very similar across the countries as well. So, and more recently, we have actually done this test across. We have used different questions, but we were able to do more recently a global survey. So we have asked financial literacy question in 143 countries. And more recently, with Allianz, we were able to do a survey just focused on risk literacy. And we confirmed the result of this survey that risk is the concept that people know the least. And of course, thinking about insurance, thinking about long-term security, of course, dealing with risk is one of the most important concepts. If you ask people to do simple calculation of expected value, if you ask people to make decisions about, for example, risk and return, we actually see that these are the concepts that people truly know the least. So the question is, yes, people do not know, but does it matter? And this is, in a sense, probably even more important question than financial knowledge per se. Does it matter that people do not have the knowledge? In any case, they could rely on advisor, they could rely on people perhaps who know, They could still make good decisions. What we have done throughout time is try to assess whether there is a link between financial knowledge and financial behavior. I'm going to tell you about retirement planning because this was the question that was present in all of the surveys across all of these 15 countries. So the project was really organizing, everybody had to report the same statistic, and then everybody had to verify the link between financial literacy and retirement planning. So let me tell you how the question, for example, about retirement planning is asked in the US. In the US, because of the presence of defined contribution pension, people are indeed in charge, a lot of kind of their retirement security are in charge of contributing to the retirement account to decide how much to contribute, and often employers do a match or are automatically enrolling their workers into the pension, and but people have to choose, for example, how to invest their pensions. So, much of their financial security is due to the contribution to this retirement account. So in the US, there is this question, have you ever tried to figure out how much you need to save for retirement? To get some assessment of whether people have at least done some calculation, have kind of planned a little bit for their future. And we have asked this question about retirement planning in many different ways. So this is, in a sense, the simpler way to ask, because we wanted to assess whether people have, the word figure out is on purpose, because we didn't want to be very precise. We didn't say, have you done the calculation? Because some people might not have done the calculation, even though they have a plan, which is I contribute to my retirement account. And they might have, have done some step toward, deciding that future. Because, by the way, if you don't do the calculation and if you don't, know about the replacement rate, it's very difficult to get this right, in a sense, and really know whether you are saving enough for your retirement. So we have tried this in many different ways. Let me report, in a sense, the simpler way to ask this retirement planning. And if you look even at the most recent data, this is the 2015 National Financial Capability Study, we see that overall in the US, less than 50% of the employees, these are people employed, 23 to 61, is because at 62 you can withdraw Social Security. So about 50% have actually tried to figure out how much to save for retirement, and this has only gone up a little. Overall, a lot of people actually do not even think about their retirement, do not think about the future. They have not done any calculation about their retirement saving, even though in the US this is very much on their shoulder. Why do I care about retirement planning? It's because there is a very, very strong link between planning and wealth. I'm going to report it here in a very simple way that, for example, people who plan have 3 times the amount of wealth at retirement that people who do not plan. You might argue, of course, because there are so many characteristics that this planner might have. Actually, even if you account for a lot of these characteristics, it seems that the planning per se is strongly correlated with wealth. And so, I've actually written a lot of paper trying to kind of show that, planning is a very important way to have higher wealth at retirement. So we don't have information about wealth in our data set. It takes actually a lot of questions to measure wealth properly, but we look at this very simple indicator, whether or not people have tried to figure out whether their retirement, to figure out how much they need at retirement. And because we have only 1 question, again, we were able to add this question in other surveys as well. And so the other countries as well had similar question, and we could do this analysis. Now, how do you assess the impact of financial literacy on retirement planning? Just a very simple analysis for some of the graduate students. So, we were trying to assess the effect. Of course, the two are linked, right? They are linked because probably if you have financial literacy, you have higher income, higher education, you might come from a family of higher education. So you have to account for a lot of variables and really see whether financial literacy has an effect above and beyond this variable, even upon education, right? But the other things that we have to worry about is that financial literacy, how much you know, is not a gene you are born with. Your knowledge could also be acquired, for example, by experience, or could be acquired by your own interest or by an investment in kind of your financial knowledge. So in addition to think about financial literacy, we had to think about, how to assess causality. And that's actually very, very difficult. So what we had to do is find, in a sense, almost an experiment, or find a way to clean the data by the fact that some of this financial literacy might have been acquired by yourself, and what led you to acquire financial literacy also led you to acquire wealth. So we use whether or not you were exposed to financial education, meaning you were in a state that mandated financial education in high school, or you work in a workplace that offered financial education. So in other words, we look at exposure. If you were exposed to financial education, so it was not your choice, so almost you were almost injected. It is as if I give you a medicine, you were almost injected with financial education, and so you had a higher financial education that somebody who went to a state who didn't mandate financial education, so does that higher financial education is connected to retirement planning. So this is evidence from the US, and what I can show you that in the US, the simple correlation are indeed positive, and even if we do the other corrections, in a sense, for the fact that financial literacy might be endogenous, we still find this positive correlation. In other words, if you have higher financial literacy, after I take into consideration of your characteristics, that higher knowledge does translate into a higher financial planning. And this is true not just in the US, but in a lot of other countries as well, where when we also were able to figure out what's the concept that mattered the most, it seems risk diversification. And I don't know whether it's because risk matters so much. I do think it's because risk matters so much, but it's also because risk was the question better able to differentiate among different level of knowledge. In a sense, for the other, the question was so simple that I wasn't potentially able to differentiate among level of knowledge, while risk seemed to be the most important one. And when we look at across the 8 countries that participated into that project, actually the Netherlands is one of the countries where knowledge and financial literacy seem to have the greater impact on retirement planning. So what could be the mechanism? Why is it that financial literacy translates into this retirement planning? One idea is that perhaps you do the calculation, and so like in macro, for example, we have this model where if, we seem that a lot of people not only do not save, but they seem to follow a rule of thumb. And so in a lot of macro model, we add now the rule of thumb consumer, which only set consumption equal to income. So they don't really save very much. So this could be one idea, that if you don't do any calculation, if you don't think about the future, you tend to consume everything today. Or the other maybe mechanism is that if you have high financial knowledge, you are better able to invest. And according to our studies, we do find that people who have higher financial literacy certainly are more likely to contribute to their account. They are more likely to invest in the stock market. And even they are more likely to hold equity. And they are even more likely to get a higher return adjusted for risk. Okay? So we actually took this evidence more recently and we put it in a simple life cycle model. And we said, okay, so if if people which have higher financial knowledge are better able to get a higher return on the market, how much does it matter for wealth close to retirement? So this is our most recent publication. I'm telling you because I cannot tell you how proud I am of this publication. It took 4 years to publish this paper, endless revision, probably four referees report. So it takes a lot of work, but we finally were able to show that you can publish in the Journal of Political Economy even if you work on financial literacy. So this is for you graduate students to say that this is a topic that on which you can publish in a top journal. For us, the more important result is that financial literacy can explain more than 1/3 of wealth inequality in the US, wealth close to retirement. So it's not a sideshow. Financial literacy does seem to have a big impact on wealth and the difference in wealth. So after all of this work, what can we do? And this is, in a sense, I was going to try to tell you a little bit my journey on this research, which is I started more than 10 years ago working on financial literacy. I thought it was very important to start with measurement because the data can give you a lot of insight about, like the vulnerable groups, the finding about financial literacy. It can also give you a lot about, in which way financial literacy matters. And after all of this work, 5 years ago, I actually moved to George Washington University. We are at the very, very center of Washington, D.C., 3 blocks from the White House. So if you come to visit, we'll take you to the White House and to the Washington Monument. We are very, very central. And we started this center, which is called Global Center for Financial Literacy. And what we do, we are actually using all of the finding, in a sense, for our research to design financial education program, which we hope can improve both financial literacy and financial security. And I'm going to tell you about these programs just because to show you that even a small center like us, in a sense, can design program, can make a little difference, in a sense, in how we, certainly maybe in suggestions on how we can improve financial literacy and how we can help people make financial decisions. It's very clear, at least to me, that the level of financial literacy are just too low today for people to be prepared for the future. We need to, the reason why I think we are ignorant is not that, we don't know, is that the world has changed and we are not keeping up. Young people are not keeping up with the world which is changing. And that's why we need to make very fundamental changes, clearly, in particular in school. So we really need to improve the level of knowledge. We also see that people do not plan for retirement, even in economies where the retirement security is very much on their shoulder. So as we change the pension system, I think we really need to make sure that we pay attention to these important changes, because it seems to me that across the world, longevity is changing everywhere, and we need to help people kind of think about the future and make financial decisions about their future. And also, I think it's very, very important to target the young, because they have a great resource, which is time. And we need time to work in their favor. I tell my students that when they sleep, interest compounding is still at work. So, they have a great opportunity with respect to me, which is they are much younger. So their wealth can really increase a lot over time. And so, it's critically important that we put financial literacy in the school, both because the world is changing, because the young have a great resource, which is time, and because a change in the pension system, if we are going to live to 100, we need to prepare for that big change, and we need people, in a sense, to be prepared for this right at the beginning, not when they turn 50. So I want to, according to our research, and because the financial literacy level are so low, we need, in a sense, robust intervention and initiative that can be scalable. And here, I wanted to tell you about some of the initiative. In a sense, the school is ideal because if you can add financial literacy in a lot of schools, that's a very, very scalable initiative, and it becomes much easier, by the way, to reach the population. In fact, I think that every year we delay not having financial literacy in school, we have a generation that goes in the market that is going to be potentially very hard to reach later on. You have consumers or investors that are not as knowledgeable, and we can have implication for society as well. But if you look at the adult population, people are at work, and so one important way to do financial education is the workplace. Another place where to do financial education is in the places where people go to learn. So I'm going to tell you about one of the initiatives that we have been doing, thinking exactly about how to make financial education effective. To make it effective, you have to do it in places, or to have to do it in a way that's scalable, low cost, and can reach a lot of people. So, of course, we are at a university, so the first thing we could do is start with us. So since 4 years ago, we have actually a personal finance course at the George Washington University. So if you were to study at GW, you can take a personal finance course. And in the same way, we teach corporate finance, or we teach CFO how to manage money. We should now teach young people to manage their money, because over the lifetime, they are going to have quite a bit of money. They are their own CFO. We have also have a special program, personal financial management, for a special group. We are actually teaching football players. We have a program which is called STAR, EMBA. It stands, is of course a plain word. It stands for special access and training opportunities. Mostly we train professional football players. These people are, as you can imagine, ideal target for financial education. They are young, they have a lot of money, they don't know anything about finance, but they have all of the characteristics that are important for finance. They actually understand persistence, they actually understand patience, they actually understand the relationship between effort and return. So they are actually great, the great student. Just some technical difficulties. They are so big, we couldn't actually sit them in the classroom. But apart from that, it's quite fun to teach to this special student. The other things that we have done is, because people lack so much this financial knowledge, we have actually done programs just targeting to the millennials. So we have done a very easy financial education program, which is called 5-Step to Planning Success. And it's just the teaching of these 5 fundamental concepts. The 2 we have added is taking advantage of tax advantage asset, which in the US are the 401k and the IRAs, and also taking advantage of employer matches, which is, in a sense, a very US experience, but is another way in which you can help people and teach people about this concept. And we have taken advantage of all of the research that we have had, showing that people don't understand risk, they don't know the language of finance. Millennials want things right away, so you cannot have it in the classroom, it has to be a video online, done in a kind of fancy way, very simple. So we actually took a long time to design a 3-minute video teaching about this concept. And we were able to test it actually using, we uploaded this video on an online survey, and we were able, using a control group, to evaluate the effectiveness of this program, and potentially, and probably because financial knowledge is so low, we actually find that even a 3 minutes video has been able to improve the knowledge, not just of the young people to which it was directed. Actually, we exposed everybody to this video, even though they had these young people in there. Actually, we find that it affected the knowledge of other age group as well. This knowledge is retained after 8 months. And so, even simple project like this one, even simple video, I think have an effect. And I think this is, again, evidence, just that the knowledge is so low that a lot can be done, in a sense, to improve financial knowledge. And technology, of course, can help a lot when it comes to millennial. Let me now turn to another project, which is related to the workplace. And yet again, I want to tell you about a project we did at the university, because a university is also an employer. And so when I was at Dartmouth, actually the vice president for finance called us in the office because he had a problem that most of the non-faculty employee was not contributing to a supplementary retirement account. Not only that, but many of these employees were using payday lenders. And I don't know if you are familiar with this instrument, but in the US, you can go to these alternative financial services, bring your pay stub, and you get a loan before you get your stipend. So it's an anticipation of your stipend. That's why it is called payday loans. And it charges more or less 500% interest rate. So it's paid in a fixed fee. And so you get, in a sense, an extremely expensive loan. Normally it's just a few days or it's just a few weeks loan. But the interest rate is very, very high, as evidence potentially that people are in financial distress or they are not very savvy in their financial decision making. And so, what we design here, we have used, again, all of our knowledge to design programs to help people basically contribute to a supplementary retirement account. So what we did, because these were Dartmouth employees, not our general people, we actually did a lot of focus group and in-depth interview with them. And one of the things we heard over and over is that they didn't know where to start. They didn't know even how to contribute to a retirement account, and they had a lot of difficulties in a sense, even understanding this information, and also what they were concerned was debt and debt management. We also ask who they turn to for information about finance. Who do you think they turn to for information about finance? Family and friends and their colleagues. So normally, and this is, I think, a very interesting finding, which is true in a lot of countries, when people are asked, who do they turn to? Often they turn to people like them, which might not help very much, but this is a very common finding, which, by the way, is normally true for people who have low financial literacy. So the problem is people with low financial literacy often do not go to advisor. And so a lot of people feel that, this financial literacy, or, the financial advisor who think that this financial literacy research is really threatening them. I have to tell you that there is a very strong positive correlation between financial literacy and financial advice, meaning it's the people who have high financial literacy that turn to financial advisor, not the other way around. Financial advice is not a substitute for a financial literacy, is a complement to financial literacy. So the more we improve financial literacy, the more people will turn to an advisor. So what do we do here? We design a simple planning aid. This was done with the help of a professor of marketing at the business school at Dartmouth, which really indicates yet again the step that people have to take to turn to basically contribute to a retirement account. And we collected for them all of the information. So in other words, we just simplified the process for enrolling into a retirement account. again, you might have think, well, everybody should have thought of that. That might be true, but the reality is, financial decisions for a lot of people are difficult decisions. We also did, since people said that they turned to their colleagues, we interviewed the colleagues. And so we had a 3-minute video, yet again, of colleagues. These are people from Dartmouth that say in their own words why they save for retirement, why they have been able to save for retirement, and why they invest the way they invest. So it's just an interview with people in their own words that actually show that they are able to save and that they are able to invest. This very, very simple intervention here is just a simple project we did, increased both participation, and the video was actually the one that had the stronger influence in how much people participate. I'm almost done, but I cannot resist not tell you about this more recent project we are doing with the Federal Reserve System. They are just across the street from us, so another reason to tell you about our special location. We are at the center of Washington, D.C., 3 blocks from the White House, 2 blocks from the central bank. So we have a seminar together with the central bank, but we have also collaborated with them. And so the Federal Reserve do not only hire economists, but there are lots of other staff employees. And yet again, they had an issue about, how people participated and contributed to this very, very convenient, in a sense, DC pension. So we were able to look and work with them on financial literacy. First, we got the data from them, and we confirmed that the people who have higher financial knowledge are more likely to contribute. They are even more likely to get a higher return on their portfolio. And then we exposed them to a financial education program. This was designed by them with our help, but it was also online. It was also done with a video, so we could also find out how these kind of simple programs affected the participation and contribution to the retirement account. And yet again, we find that people completed this module were more likely to start contributing. They are less likely to have stopped contributing. And so this knowledge included contribution and also allocation in this pension account. So in other words, these programs at the workplace actually are a way in which we can help people make financial decisions. And a way to be effective is really, of course, to kind of listen to the employees and actually target the program, design a program that really serve those needs. I'm also very happy to tell you that several years ago, we were hired by the New York Stock Exchange. So we actually designed a very general program for the big firms. So it was called Financial Fit. In a sense, very, very general, and that firm could then take and adapt to their population. And during financial literacy months, we went and rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. How cool is that? It was totally cool. We actually got to see the stock exchange. We had the visit. They gave us a medal. It was totally cool. And then we rang the bell as well. So here we go. I want to finish. I am really done. With one of the projects I'm kind of most proud or more interested in. Several years ago, we became, together with one of your colleagues, Paolo Sodini, advisor to a new museum in Italy, which is called Museum of Savings. We have 5,000 museums in Italy, and now we have 5,001. It's a museum in Turin, so if you need an excuse to go to Turin, here we go. You have to go and see the Museum of Savings in Italy. It literally is a museum of financial literacy. There are these little ants that guide you through these 5 rooms, and they actually teach you, in a sense, the history of money and finance. There are interviews with very, very famous people. For example, Mario Draghi is one of our most precious economists. And just to want to show you a little bit how he looks like. He's super spiffy. You can even watch movies that have a financial literacy component. You can listen to Dante giving you lesson about financial literacy. So it's something to be seen. But more recently, we also did a Federation of Finance Museum. So we have now linked to several museums around the world. A lot of central banks have finance museum, and we have used the museum to do financial literacy program. Why? Because we can reach a very important group, the young. So for example, in Turin, we do a lot of lessons for the children or for young people. And I love the idea of a museum because the museum is really a place where you go to learn and have fun. And finance should be like that, you know, be a place where go to learn and have fun. So that's, we are very proud about financial literacy. And I'm going to tell you, you know, 2017 for me is going to be the best year. Because this year in July, the Ministry of Finance and the Economy appointed me as director of this new financial education committee. So, you know, a dream came true. I get not only to do financial literacy, but to do financial literacy in my own country. This is actually a special treat because I get to have my mom read about financial literacy in the newspaper. And for every Italian, the Italian mama is very important. So it increases my well-being a great, great deal. But it is a great also here, because I even get to have a prize from Scandia. So I think 2017 has been a very good year for me. Thank you very much. I'm really going to end now to tell you that you didn't, as you have inferred, financial literacy, I think, is really like reading and writing. You know, we need to have this. It really is a stepping stone for financial security. And I want to end with two quotes. One is actually from our founder, the George Washington. George Washington is a very legendary president in the United States. He's the first president, but still today is considered very legendary because, you know, he really constructed the democracy in the US. And he said that knowledge is in every country the surest basis of public happiness. And I really do hope that he meant financial knowledge, or that that knowledge extends to the financial knowledge. And I want to come back to a definition I had at the beginning, which is the definition of financial literacy. If I had to give you a definition, I think what financial literacy is a vision for the future. That's, in a sense, what almost every financial decision is about, and it's very important that we have this vision, because I think the very important question is which future do we want to build? And it's clear that, you know, this is a question that an institution like Scandia, an institution like your regulatory authority are really considering, and that's why it's such a pleasure to be here today in Sweden. Thank you very much.